What's the response from the UK been like?
Oh, I haven't had a response from the UK government as of yet, or my successor hasn't had a response either. So the UK was given 60 days to respond. And now you have to remember, we filed this communication right as the pandemic was unfolding. So in some ways, I'm willing to cut a little slack to the government who might be otherwise somewhat preoccupied, though, of course, no one would want to see another tragedy, certainly not amidst the pandemic.
Well, indeed, I was going to say the cladding issue, that is important as well, but the government, as you said, is having to deal with the pandemic. But in the meantime, it has taken action, but it's discovered more cladding, hasn't it?
It has. I think at the time that I filed the communication, we understood there to be approximately 360 buildings with this flammable cladding on the exterior, which is deeply concerning. More concerning is, in fact, the 600,000 approximately people living in the buildings with this cladding, who are really living in with a great feeling of anxiety and insecurity. And believe it or not, that's actually part of the human right to housing. In other words, people shouldn't be living in fear that their housing is going to combust. That would be not compliant with international human rights law around housing.
Well, Leilani, that's what I was going to ask you. How much of an impact has this situation had on tenants' mental health?
A great deal of an impact. I have to say, we heard from many tenants and associations of tenants saying that the anxiety levels are high and real, that there is even, some worry of suicide, and a real concern, because it's not just concern that the building might be flammable. That's a real concern. And of course, the Grenfell tragedy, was such a clear warning sign. The inquiry was very clear that the cladding had everything to do with the extent and depth of that fire and the tragedy and the 72 lives lost. So people are fearful of that, but they're also struggling because they would like to sell their units, for example, and move somewhere else that feels safer. But of course, they can't get any lender. No one's going to give a mortgage on a unit that has this cladding on it, for example. So there's that stress as well. I know the government has committed dollars, or I should say pounds, toward this, but those monies are not really rolling out. And so that's obviously of real concern. So that would be one of the questions my successor would be asking the government of the UK. Is like, okay, how can you get this program to roll out more swiftly to ensure that everyone's lives are safe, especially in the middle of this pandemic? People are already dealing with such stress, and then to add to their stress, this issue is just too unfortunate.
Well, Leilani, one final brief question, if you wouldn't mind. Is there a short-term solution? It seems cladding removal at the moment is halted due to the outbreak, the coronavirus outbreak. What can they do in the meantime, very briefly, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think that people need to sit down, the tenants need to sit down with councils and governments to figure out what those short-term solutions might look like. I'm not in a position to offer those solutions. That should come from the tenants and in discussion with government officials. I'm sure there are short-term solutions. I have a feeling if the money could roll out more quickly, there probably could be some immediate solutions. But I leave that to those who are in the situation to determine how best to deal with it.